Hello everyone, and today we're going to be changing out the brake pads and rotors for this Nissan Altima to look like new again, as well as help pass inspection. So let's get started. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to loosen the lug nuts. Now these are aftermarket wheels, so it is going to require a key, but for most of you who have the OEM ones, all you need is a 21mm socket, and all we're going to do is just break these loose. And now we can go ahead and lift the vehicle up. So this is going to require a jack and jack stand. And I'm going to go ahead and lift all four wheels up and use all four jack stands because I'm going to do some painting later. But for those of you who want to do just the brakes and rotors, all you need to do is one wheel at a time. So now that we have it at least an inch off the ground, let's go ahead and remove these lug nuts and get the wheel off. So there's the third lug nut, there's number 4, number 5, and let's see how to lift this up. There we go, and let's move this aside. And now since these are aftermarket wheels, we have to remove this little ring as well. And the first bolts we're going to remove are the sliding pin bolts. So it's this one right here. And see if I can move the camera down, and that one right there. So these are going to be the first two we're going to loosen up. So now let's go ahead and grab our 14mm socket and socket wrench. Let's see if we can give this a little oomph. And there we go. So that's nice and loosened up. Let's go ahead and back this all the way out. And then we'll set that aside. And we'll do the same thing with the bottom one as well. Requires a little bit of oomph. It's been on there for a while. And come on, there we go. And we'll set that one aside as well. So now we can go ahead and move the caliper. All you have to do is give it a little oomph, hopefully without dropping it. There we go. Now I'm going to grab one of these cool hangers. These are very easy to come by and very cheap. And all you have to do is hang it right on the spring, and you can spin it right in place. Just that easy. So now let's go ahead and remove the brake pads, and these should just come right off. With a little bit of prying. There's one, and one more, and there's two. So now let me bring the camera in so you can see our next set of bolts. There's going to be one right here, and one at the bottom. Right there. These are our torque member bolts. These are going to be loosening up next. And to loosen those up, you're going to need a 22mm socket and a socket wrench. And let's see if I can get in there. And it's going to require a little bit of oomph. So there's one, and there's two. And now that we broke them loose, let's go ahead and take them out. So there's the top one. Looks like it's in pretty good shape. And let's get the bottom one as well. There we go. And we'll go ahead and take the torque member off and set that aside. So now we can remove our rotor. So go grab your hammer, give it a few love taps, and it should come right off. So now we get to introduce our nice little cool set we just acquired. This is a brake caliper compression set. You don't necessarily need one of these, but it does make the job a lot easier. So I'm going to grab this backing plate and go ahead and install it on the thrust bolt and go ahead and back it off just a little bit. Then I'm going to take one of these pin discs, which I'll go ahead and grab this one, and I'll show you how we're going to use it. It's actually really easy. So obviously we'll start with our front calipers here. So I'm going to take that backing plate, insert it right in, and see if I can hold it without tipping over the camera. Then we're going to take our pin disc, put it right up against the piston, and we're going to start screwing it down just like a bolt. And you're going to feel a little slight resistance when you start doing this. That's completely normal. Just go nice and slow until the piston is compressed. And it looks like we're at a good stop point. Let's go ahead and back it off and remove our tool. And before we move forward in installing any parts, let's go and clean the area off. So go and grab your brake cleaner, clean the dust shield really good, get all that brake dust off, as well as a wire brush. I want to remove all this excess rust. It's kind of an eyesore, as well as it's kind of bad if you want to put your rotor on later and it's just full of rust. So now with the area clean, now we can focus on the torque member. Now this is going to require a little bit of minor maintenance. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove these spring clips. And they come off fairly easy, but you may need a screwdriver if they are on there pretty good. Next, we're going to go ahead and remove the sliding pins, and you want to pay attention to which side is which. One side has a bushing, one side does not. So when I take these off, I'm going to put one on the left and one on the right. And this is on there really good. So let's go ahead and set those aside and clean one off at a time. So I'm removing all the grease and doing a visual inspection to make sure there's no damage to that pin. So far they look pretty good. And I'm going to go to the next one and do the same thing. Just remove all the grease, make sure they're nice and clean, and they're not damaged. If they're damaged, they need to be replaced. And of course, let's go ahead and clean off the torque member. So I'm going to grab your brake cleaner and go ahead and use a generous amount. Just remove all that excess brake dust. And now that's nice and dry, let's go ahead and grab some synthetic grease and grease up these sliding pins so we can install them. And I'm going to apply a nice generous amount just to make sure they're coated very nicely. And make sure we get all sides. Looks pretty good. And all you have to do is push these right in. It's going to fight you, but you just got to make sure you get it all the way in. Alright, so there's one. And it slides in and out pretty good, so that's a good sign. And do the same thing with the bushing side as well. And we'll install that one. Very nice. So now we went ahead and unbagged our brand new rotor. I'm going to spray this down with brake cleaner because it does have a little bit of residue on there. So we're going to make sure we clean that all off. And then I'm going to go ahead and wipe it down with a nice shop towel. And then we can go ahead and install it, and this just slides right on. And there we go. Now you don't have to do this step, but it does make your job easier. Go ahead and grab a lug nut and go ahead and tighten it down on the rotor so it stays in place. So now we can install our torque member bolts. So we're going to need some thread locker, and we're going to apply a nice generous amount to the threads. And then grab our torque member here. Now you notice it does have a nice little coat of black on here. I did paint these off camera, but if you wish to see some of the footage, I did put it at the end of this video. It's not in great detail. If you want to know how to paint your brakes, I do have another video for that. So now that we got these finger tight, let's go and grab our 22mm socket, get them nice and snug. So there's one, let's get the top one. And there we go. Now we can grab our torque wrench, and it's going to be set to 107 foot-pounds, which requires quite a bit of oomph. And there we go. So now we get to install our brand new spring clips, which are nice and shiny. And these install very easily. All I have to do is press right on. It's going to be a little bit stiff, but they're not difficult at all. So let's see. So there's one, and we'll get the top one. Requires a little bit of oomph. And there's two. Now something very important, grab a flathead screwdriver and pry against the spring clip against the rotor. Some of these clips, these aftermarket ones, let me see if I can zoom in. There's a little metal tab right, let's see if I can see it, right there. And it barely touches the rotor. So you want to make sure you take a flathead screwdriver and pry against it, because sometimes these aftermarket ones will touch the rotor and it will sound like metal on metal. So let's go back again and grab our brake grease. Apply a few dabs on the back of the brake pad. And you just want a little bit of dab will do you for this step. You don't need a lot. In fact, less is more in this case. Now my rule of thumb is anytime moving metal touches moving metal, you usually want a media in between it. So we apply a very, very thin coat of grease on these edges because that's going to be touching your springs and touching metal. So now we're ready to install, and I'm going to start from the bottom and try to slide it right in this little groove while pushing downward, and then push forward. Perfect, nice and smooth. And of course we're going to repeat the same steps on the inner brake pad as well. And this is coming together very nicely. So let's go ahead and start our caliper. All you have to do is slide it right on. Beautiful. Now if this doesn't slide on easily, go ahead and compress your piston a little bit more. But since this one went on very well, let's go ahead and install our bolts. And I'm going to start with finger tight. Tighten them up with our 14mm socket and socket wrench. And then go ahead and torque it down to 20 foot-pounds. And for this step, this is optional. I want to apply a little bit of anti-seize on the outside of the rotor where the wheel meets up with the rotor, just to make it easier to remove the wheel later on. And a dab will do you. All you need is a little bit, and spread it all around just to give you a nice thin even coat. And then I took a shop towel and cleaned around it just to make sure there's no splatter later on. And so far this came out looking really good. So now we can install our wheel and lug nuts. I'm going to see if I can hold that right on there with my leg. And I want to get these lug nuts as tight as possible while it's suspended in the air. And then we'll do a quick check. Sounds pretty good. So now we go ahead and lift up the vehicle, remove our jack stand, and go ahead and lower it down. And the last step we do for this wheel is torque down the lug nuts to 83 foot-pounds. And we're noticing the star pattern. So there's 2, 3, 4, and 5. And with the front complete, we can move our way to the rear. So we want to loosen up all the lug nuts, lift up the vehicle, put our jack stand under there. And let's go ahead and remove the rest of those lug nuts, and then go ahead and remove our wheel. So now let me go ahead and bring the camera in, and we got one sliding pin right there, and one right there. So now we can go ahead and grab our 14mm socket and socket wrench, go ahead and break these loose. And these come right out as well. Again, there's one at the bottom and one at the top. These are both different. So this one doesn't have a bushing, but the top one does. So let me go and break that one loose. And the rest of it comes out basically finger tight. And now the top one does have a black bushing. Just make sure you know which one's which. And again, I'm going to grab one of these cool hanger hooks. Go ahead and find an area to hang it at. Take off the brake caliper. And then go ahead and hang it and put it aside. Beautiful. And now we have easy access to our brake pads. And these come right off as well. Not too bad, but yeah, they look like they need to be changed. And again, I'm going to bring my camera in so you can see what bolts I'm working on. So I have one bolt right there, and then one at the bottom right. There it is, right there. These are our torque member bolts, and these are not that hard to get to. But this top one is a little tricky. So I have a socket wrench and a socket, and I'm having a hard time getting in there. So let's go ahead and grab a 19mm wrench and see if we can break it loose just with a regular wrench. All right, now we can use a socket wrench for the bottom one though. And there we go. Now, as a very important tip, make sure you disengage the parking brake for this next step. So we're going to go ahead and press it in and release. So now let's go ahead and remove this rubber plug, and this comes out very easy. All you need is your fingers. Now the rotor has a little stiffness to it when it's turning. So I'm going to take a flathead screwdriver and move a bolt that's on the inside, which I'll show you in the next step. So now that the rotor's easy to turn, take a little hammer, give it a little love tap, go ahead and pull it right off. I'm going to bring this camera in so you can see what I was turning. That little silver guy right there, I was taking a flathead screwdriver and moving it upward just to bring these brake pads in, just so I can take the rotor off. And now we're ready to go ahead and compress our piston. So go ahead and grab your pin disc and then your compression tool. Same thing as earlier, just go slow until the piston is compressed. And now we can take our brake parts cleaner, go ahead and clean the area. Again, same as the front, make sure you get your dust shield. Make sure everything's nice and clean. And I'm going to take my wire brush, same thing, I want to remove all this excess rust. So now we can go ahead and focus our attention on this torque member. And same thing as the other one. You want to go ahead and remove all the clips and go ahead and spray this down with brake cleaner and make sure it's nice and clean. Just want to remove all this excess brake dust. And then we'll take our new rotor out of the bag, spray it down with brake cleaner again, as well as get brake cleaner all over the camera. And when it comes to your rotors, you can never have too much brake cleaner. And we'll go ahead and install this one as well. There we go. And again, I'm going to use a lug nut just to hold the rotor in place. So let's go ahead and grab some blue thread locking compound. Apply a little bit to our torque member bolt. Bring our torque member in. And it looks really good after it's painted. And let's go ahead and start by finger tightening these in. And we'll start with the top one. Apply a little bit of thread lock compound to the bottom one as well. Finger tight that one. And then we'll tighten it down with a 19mm socket and socket wrench. And then we'll go ahead and torque it down to 62 foot-pounds. Now something very important, some of these new ones come with two different clips. As you can see here, there's a bigger gap in the middle of this clip. So make sure you grab the exact same one as your old clips. That way it matches up perfectly. And then we'll go ahead and install them same way as the front. These push right on. So there's the bottom one. And we'll do the top one as well. Come on. There we go. Looks pretty good. And of course, we're going to use the same brake grease. Now this one has a metal tab on one of these brake pads. For that metal tab, we're going to go on the inside. So pay attention which one's the inside pad and which one's the outside. So I'm applying a nice thin coat on the back of the pad as well as the edges. And it looks pretty good. And then we're going to install this one. This one slides right on as well. And then we're going to apply grease and do the same thing on the outer pad. And now we're ready to slide on our caliper. And that's starting to look really good with that nice paint job. And then we'll take our sliding pin, clean that up really nice. So you can see the black bushing on the top. Make sure you know which one's which. Apply a little bit of grease to it. Make sure it's nice and covered. And looking at this pin, it actually looks like it's in good shape. I don't see any damage to it, so that's a very good sign. And let's see if I can insert this without dropping it. And we'll start with finger tight. So that one looks pretty good. We'll do the same thing with the bottom one, clean that one up. And these don't look like they're in bad shape at all. And then same thing, apply a little bit of grease, make sure it's covered. And we're going to install this one finger tight. Then go and grab your 14mm socket and socket wrench and go and get these till they're nice and snug. So let's go ahead and torque these down to 32 foot-pounds. And this is actually really easy to get to. So there's 1 and 2. And now with the brake parts installed, now I can go ahead and remove this lug nut. And we're going to go ahead and apply a thin coat of anti-seize, same thing as earlier. A dab will do you, and just go ahead and apply a nice thin coat on the outside. You don't want a lot because then it's going to splatter everywhere else. And then we'll take a shop towel and clean up the edge. And we're almost done. Now we can install our wheel and lug nuts. So I'm going to see how to lift this on here. And there we go. Hold that in place and go ahead and install all 5 lug nuts until they're as tight as possible. And then we'll go ahead and lift the vehicle using our service jack, remove our jack stand, and then go ahead and lower it down as gently as possible. And now, of course, let's go ahead and torque these down. Use our 20mm socket and torque wrench to 83 foot-pounds in a star pattern. And before we go on a test drive, let's go ahead and do a visual inspection of all of our wheels, as well as admire a little bit of the work. I like seeing a job that it comes out looking a lot better as when you started. The paint really adds a little pop to it, as well as these brand new rotors add a nice little shine. It actually looks really good. I like how this turned out. Now, before we go on this test drive, let's go and verify our brake fluid level. So you can see right here, see, it's kind of hard to see in this lighting, but I'll get my finger in there. Right there, we're right below the max line, so we're good to go. We don't have to add fluid. And now for our very last step, all we have to do is break in our new brakes, which is pad bedding. Very easy procedure. All you have to do is go up to 40 miles an hour and aggressively stop to 10 miles an hour, and you're going to do this 5 times. Then you're going to do the same thing from 35 to 5 miles an hour. Now when you do this, you're going to start smelling some brakes or resin. That's completely normal. And after you do those 10 aggressive stops, all you have to do is drive around for about 5 to 10 minutes just to allow your brakes to cool. And I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe.